All right, we're live now. Cool.
Okay.
So I think let's just give some time so that we have more people joining up. Uh, so we'll start it at somewhere around 9495. Should be good.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Just gonna post this on Insta as well.
Okay. But this is already live, right?
Yeah, we're already live. Just waiting for people, and once we have a couple more people, generally, to build some momentum, then we start. Yeah.
Okay. Do you know if someone has joined yet?
Yep, a bunch of people have. I think we have 5 people already.
Wow.
Yeah. It keeps adding once. Yeah, there's going to be more audience coming in once we start posting everywhere. Uh, but yeah, I think we're good to go. We can probably start. Just give me 1 second.
Okay.
Cool. All right. So thanks to everyone for joining. Who all the people who have joined so far. Welcome to the Creative Hustle, and this is this fourth episode of Dine and Design. In today's episode with us, we have Darshan, who's been a remote designer for 5+ years now. He's worked with Book My Show, Wishberry, M Canvas, and a lot of other companies. Currently, he leads design at Graph CMS in Berlin, and he's also been running Product Disrupt, which is a newsletter for creators, designers, makers, and It's been out for a while now, and it basically works like a curated list of resources that helps people learn product design and is pretty much relevant to everyone at every stage in their career. We'll be talking about working remotely and building an audience, and also finding new opportunities and side hustles. And I think this is something that's really valuable during this time where a lot of people are going through this time of uncertainty. This is something that's really going to help a lot of people. So welcome, Darshan. It's great to see you here, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Sahil. And that was a really nice intro.
How have things been? How are things going on here? And how are things in Berlin with the whole lockdown and all that?
Things are looking good now. Berlin has opened up. Office people have started to go to the office. You have to wear a mask when you're in public places or public transport.
Mhm.
But we don't have a lockdown, so it seems to be okay.
Yeah, I think that's the good part. Things are getting good here as well. I mean, at least so people are back on track. Like businesses have started opening up as well. Although the cases have not really reduced, but yeah, I mean, nonetheless, a lot of businesses have opened up, which is something which is good. A lot of people are applying for new jobs and things like that. So that's something great. So Darshan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where do you come from? How did you get into design? Maybe just a bit of background.
Yeah, sure. So, uh, I studied my engineering. I did computer engineering from Mumbai.
Mhm.
And when I was in engineering, I used to take a lot of freelance projects. And it was just like making a website. I was not aware there was a thing called as design and development. I should just do it because I wanted to learn something which is already being used in the industry. And it also gave me a bit of side income. So I just kept going on with it.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's when I realized that there's also this thing called as design. And I started exploring more. And fresh out of college, I joined Book My Show.
Mhm.
So they hired me as a developer who could design.
Ah,
But luckily for me, they had enough design requirements. They were going through this complete revamp.
mhm.
And which is why they had enough requirements and they tried me out with a lot of different things. And product design is something that I stuck with. I ultimately wanted to do that, but I did not have any experience. So I would say, and after the initial few months there, I got moved to a product design team, and that is when my career as a product designer professionally started. After that, I've also worked with another company called Wishberry. It's you could compare it with Kickstarter, but it
Mhm.
has a different business model and serves a very particular niche. So over there, I was leading the product design, and since it was a very small team, so I got an opportunity to work in very close collaboration with all the different stakeholders, and the experience was quite rewarding. After this, I became a consultant, a full-time consultant. So I did that for 3 years, and being a consultant, I was fortunate to have opportunities to work with clients from countries like the UK, US, UAE, Canada, Australia, and India, of course. And during this time, I was working on long-term projects. So this is also when I started working remotely. And during this time, I also got to travel quite a lot, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to work as a consultant and not be stuck in an office.
Yeah.
Yeah, and December last year, I moved here in Berlin.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's been the story so far. And you've already talked about Product Disrupt, but we could talk about it later.
Sure, sure. We'll pick that up as well. But that's a really great story, man. Seeing how you've come from all these companies to going remote, and now that you've been like doing this for such a long time, I'm really interested in hearing if you had some form of influence when you did sort of go from engineering to design. Like, did you have any form of influence from someone around you, who's doing design, or is it something that you sort of were genuinely sort of interested in, or how was it? How did the transition happen?
I would say not really UI UX or product design, but I'd seen a few people around me who were really good at graphic design.
Hmm.
So, or you could call it like they were experts at Photoshop, and it was something that I really wanted to pick up. So yeah, I just kept on exploring that, and I mean, I wanted to get better at Photoshop and also be able to produce good graphic design work. And I also used to see regularly check websites on this award website called Awards.
How was
uh, yeah, so I just regularly kept on looking at that, and it always brings so many good websites on the showcase. And I mean, I could see that, and and I could also see that the website that I use, or the website that I usually see around me is not really up to that standard. And I was just curious about that, and I just kept on exploring these things, but did not have any influence around me. And also, this is also one thing which was very tricky, because most of my friends, we were all engineers, right?
it?
They did not understand design, and when I used to spend a lot of time doing these things, they used to think that I'm just wasting my time, or because I'm not really. They thought that I should be focusing on understanding the core concepts of engineering, or doing a lot of development,
Right.
or preparing for exams and studying and all those things. But I was not doing that,
Yeah.
and yeah, which is why I always had to fight that through, and I had to keep believing in myself. Yeah, but ultimately it worked out, so that's great.
Did you have any help at that time when you did get started? I mean, this is, I think, something that everyone faces, that not having a lot of people around them like teach, and something that you can learn from. Did you have anyone around you, or how did you learn, say, design or anything, or was it by watching? So apart from the thing that you said, which is watching awards, what were the other things that you did to learn design during that phase when you moved from engineering to design?
I mean, nowadays you could see that you have a lot of people who teach design online, or there are a lot of classes or courses that you can take. I think at that time we didn't have any of those things, and what I was mostly doing is I just kept on looking at people who were producing good work, and there are a lot of these people. They just share their work, they talk about their processes, they write newsletters, they write blogs. So I slowly started reading some of them. I think I started with hackdesign.org.
Mhm.
It's a really nice website. The way that it's structured is that it's a course. but you can take it at your ease.
Hmm.
Meaning, they curate they curate all the good articles on particular topics, and they set up the curriculum.
Hmm.
And once you apply for that, they keep on sending you those links. So I used to just and it's a course which starts from the basic of design. They would tell you what design is. They would teach you the basics of visual hierarchy, typography, colors, all those things, and then slowly they would take you into product design. So I was just continuously seeing that, and I started this when I was at Book My Show. So I also had other people around me who were already UI UX or product designers.
Right.
So I used to bug them a lot with the stupid questions that I had. I mean, sometimes they also used to think that how did he even manage to get a job here because it doesn't even know design. And yeah, I remember the look on their face. They used to help me in a way, but also most of the times they just wanted to like they just wanted to shoo me
Shut you
off.
away. Yeah.
Yeah, they just wanted to shut me away because I was that annoying guy who just keeps on asking for help. And I realized that this is not something which is going to benefit me a lot, and which is why online is the place where I always went if I had any questions. There are so many forums you could ask questions there. People would always reply. You reach out to people, you write an email, you get a reply. So yeah, it was a mix of those things, and learned it on the job as well.
I think it's fair to say that I think that's the story of like most of designers that at least I know, and I'm sure that you also know that we've all been sort of learning from other, copying people, seeing things around us, or reading about stuff. So I think a majority of the people are like that, and especially a lot of people coming from the engineering background and then trying to learn while on work. And I think that also makes it like a really beautiful sort of experience because you start from the practical things, and then as you learn you grow more and more, and that adds up to who you are, that sort of builds your personality. And also the interesting thing is if you're coming from a different background, then you also bring values from that particular sort of field that you're in. For example, in your case, engineering, so you would know like a lot of things of how they work, and then when you design you could also use those things that you know about engineering and put them in design. And I think that's something that's really helpful. I've seen people coming from army to UX to economics to from economics to UX and things like that, which is just, I mean, I think that's the most beautiful part about design in general. That, I mean, at least for UX, that people can try from different streams coming in and give it a shot and see how it works for them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Anybody can design. You just put in the work, and you would be able to become a better designer.
Yeah, that's the way to go. So on in Book My Show, when you were working, right, with the people, right? So I want to understand like how. So when you started, you were working, you're doing engineering. So sorry, you were working as a developer first, and then you started doing design, right? And then you went on to Wishberry. So in both these companies, you're working on site in their office. How did you go about choosing, or how did the thought of working remote even come to mind, or is it something that just happened out of nowhere?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, it didn't really come to my mind. It just happened organically. And when working at Book My Show, working at Wishberry, it was just a regular job on site. I had to go to office. And I was not aware of the term remote work. But I think when I was at Wishberry, that is when I started seeing people who were taking vacations, and they were working. I mean, taking vacations and even continue working. So what they needed was just a good internet connection and a laptop, and they could work from wherever they want. And I think people like this, they were called digital nomads. And yeah, so I used to just read a lot about these things, and yeah, I got interested into this. uh, so what happened after Wishberry, I actually there was this company called the Remote Life, I guess.
Yeah.
What they did was, so they used to plan remote retreats, meaning they say they would plan a 1 month of remote retreat in Thailand. That is actually where I went to.
Right.
It was my first retreat. So what they did was they would you'd pay you'd buy like an e-commerce, like how you buy an e-commerce product. You just apply it there, and you would just pay the fee at one place, and they would take care of everything else. Meaning they would have the logistics taken care of. You'd have, when you move to Thailand, you'd have a place where you could work from. They would give you the access to the co-working space. They would also book a place for you to live. They would also take care of the visa. I think air tickets were supposed to be booked by me, but all the other things they did that. And since it was like a community thing, they also had other people who came to Thailand just for the same thing. So these were people who maybe they had their own businesses, or they were working for some other companies, and they just came here and worked remotely for a month. That is also what I did, and the experience was so rewarding. And that is when I got the first taste of it, and I really liked it. So I didn't want to go back to the office then.
So, and this was in Wishberry, was it?
This was after Wishberry. When I quit my job at Wishberry, after that I had taken this remote trip to Thailand. I've also written a blog post about it.
Oh, I think that's something that we can probably link to in the description, so we can check that out later on, uh,
Yeah.
to read a little bit about your story. So, were there any so during this time, were there any issues that you faced initially when you were looking for the first time, or first time when you started working remotely? Any issues that you faced, or any challenges, and how did you sort of overcome them? If you could talk about a little.
I would say in terms of issues, uh, the good thing was that I did not start working remotely right from the very beginning.
Mhm.
Uh, even when I had a full-time job at Bookmyshow and Wishberry, I was also doing a lot of freelance work. So I was working with people who are not really in the same room. My most of the there was this agency in the US whom I was collaborating with, and yeah, most of my projects came from them. And so I already had some idea of how you can communicate, or how you could make things work even when you're not in the office.
Mhm.
So and that's one thing that I would recommend. Like if you are starting if you're starting a new job, and like this is something that you are starting after your education, uh, it would be very difficult if you just start with a remote job.
Mhm.
It's better to have some sort of experience working in an office, because you have a lot of things to learn as well. So in terms of that, I didn't have much problems. And I would say, yeah, sometimes it's like collaboration was a little difficult in the beginning, because this client that I was working with when I was in Thailand, the client was based in Mumbai, and I'd already worked with them for about 2.5 months, and after that I took this trip. So initially, I mean, we had this a break in between where I had to actually go there. So yeah, I would say the collaboration was affected a little bit in the beginning, but then later on it just worked out. And also, this is not something. This was like a it was like a contract work. It was not like a full-time job which I was doing remotely. So the kind of challenges that you face when you are on a remote job is very different from contract work, because when you're working on a contract, people sort of expect that he's an outsider, and he's going to bring different ways of working. So they are sort of mentally prepared for that. Uh, but working on a remote job is very different.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. It has its own nuances that one needs to understand. And I think it's better off if you've had some sort of experience working in a corporate environment. You understand the basics of communication, and how the whole system works, and
Yeah.
basically collaborating with other people as well.
Mhm.
So I think it's been what I think it's been more than 5 years since the first remote job, right?
Yeah, I could say that.
So what do you think has changed since then to now? How do you think things have changed since your first remote job?
I would say the whole Corona situation has actually accelerated all of these things, and now people, and also there's much more awareness about remote work now, as compared to what it was when I started.
Hmm.
And at the time, a lot of people were not aware of this concept, and they used to just, and it's also like when you don't know much about anything, you would have that fear, and yeah, you would not be very much willing to explore that. But now you see people, now you see examples of companies and people who have been able to do a good job working remotely. You could see examples like Envision or Zapier, uh, and there are also other companies, Podia. So all of these
Automatic,
companies, they are like, sorry.
automatic as well.
Yeah, automatic as well. And it's the parent company of WordPress owns what about 40% of the websites on the internet.
Yeah.
But that number must have changed now. But yeah, so now you have a lot of these examples. You see how people are doing it. There are a lot of best practices out there. People do a lot of coaching around this. So and also we have so many tools now which will allow you to work remotely. So an example would be you could have a Zoom call. Now Zoom allows you to have a call with more than what 50, 60 people at the time, or even more than that. I'm not aware of the number. But then there's Slack for communication. There's Google Drive. So there are so many of these tools. Even Figma. It has made working remotely so easy now. So I think yeah, people are more accepting now, and they are willing to explore. They're at least willing to give it a shot, and I think this is great.
Yeah, I mean, true. I think which is also one of the biggest changes. I think since probably when you started, a lot of tools for collaboration have come up because of so many. Like, I mean, every single office is now like all the big offices are open in so many locations. So that makes working across time zones also possible with all these tools, at everyone's disposal, and also. Again, keeping in mind the number of people that are using it, the options have also exceeded so much, and there are so many free options that people can try. For example, Slack and all that is something that pretty much small teams can try without really paying much. Or the same goes for Zoom, for Google Meets, and things like that. So yeah, tools definitely have made it easier, and that is something that has evolved with time. I mean, it's taken its good time to reach where we are today. What do you think are I mean, during all of this time that you worked, what do you think were some benefits that you saw? You can talk about both the benefits as well as the things that you thought were a little bit of a struggle. But we'll probably start with benefits that you saw of working remotely.
Yeah. So with remote, I would say, so first of all, I would like to make this very clear that there's a clear difference between remote work and working from home. When you're working remotely, it's remote work is mostly about asynchronous work.
Hmm.
Uh, like say if and when you are working from home, it's just that you are not in the same office, but you are logging in at the same time. You are spending you are working at the same time when your peers are also working.
Hmm.
Uh, and yeah, that's a very clear difference. And when I say asynchronous work, it's about different people would have uh, I mean the way their productivity works, or when they get into the flow, it's going to be different for all the people. So some people would like to wake up early in the morning and work. Some people might want to work in the afternoon or at the night, and that should be fine as far as you have communicated it clearly. So I think what was the question again?
So the question was, what personally do you think are some of the benefits that you've seen, while working remote during all these years?
Yeah. So asynchronous work. Now this allows you to work at your own pace. You can be a lot more productive, and you don't really have people looking over your shoulders. But the thing is that you have to be self-motivated, and that this could also be one of the cons. When you have so many people in the office, everybody's working. You don't get that kind of environment, right? And also with communication or establishing relationships, that also sometimes become difficult with remote work, because when you're in office you could just you can have water cooler chats, and you can go out with your friends for chai and sutta breaks, but that doesn't really happen when you're working remotely. So you have to proactively reach out to people. Also when you need something, you have to ask for it. Uh, it's and also scheduling is important, because uh, wait 1 second.
Sure.
I think it's very hot today. I just opened the window.
Sure. No issues.
I'll also switch on the fan. Just give me 1 second.
Sure. No issues. Take your time.
Is the audio quality okay now?
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So we were talking about the pros and cons of remote work, right?
Yep.
I think we already talked about scheduling, being proactive about your work. You have to take a lot of initiatives by yourself. Uh, yes, these are some of the pros and some of the cons, and I think I mixed it up. Sorry for that. I should have structured it more.
No issues. So you're talking about scheduling. Can you talk a little bit more about like what do you exactly mean by scheduling?
With scheduling, I would say that people, when you have people working in the different time zones, they're
Hmm.
just not going to be available when you just need them.
Hmm.
You have to be careful about you have to be looking into the schedule. You'll have to see what are the like you could just go to the calendar and you could book a spot there, and you can't. The thing is that you can't just when you're in the same office, you could just uh, you could just ask
Walk up to them.
someone that, yeah, walk up to them and ask them something right there and there. But with remote, that might not be the case. It's not that you would send a message and you would immediately get a reply. And
True.
also one other thing is that you also have to be you have to get better at written communication,
Hmm.
because a lot of things you can get sorted if you think about it well, and if you just write it down. You don't always have to get on a meeting or on a call to discuss something. And if you set up enough context and if you give them enough information in your message, that's also going to be very clear.
And yeah, I mean, and I think that's something that's very important, especially working remote, that you need to work a lot on communication, be it verbose or written or some. But yeah, I think that's the backbone of asynchronous communication. If things are not there when people need them, that will lead them to switch to synchronous, so that they can at least talk to someone, have a face to figure out like
Yeah.
what went wrong or something like that. So one thing that you mentioned while you're talking about was that remote is different from work from home or the current situation. This is a question that Siddharth also asked. What do you think is the difference between like the current work from home situation versus remote, like proper remote?
So I would say, see again, work from home. I have seen there are a lot of people who are now forced to work from home. Now, what is happening is they're just working from home, but then they are waking up at the same time. They have this regular schedule,
Hmm.
and and they are expected to work on the same time when others are also working. A lot of companies, they also make it a mandate to have some kind of login, and so that they can track your time. Some companies also ask you to install some kind of software which would give them an idea of how much time you have spent on your computer.
Right.
Uh, so this is more like keeping a track of your time, and I mean they are not really working towards the results. Uh, it's just like they are just working from a different place. But if they have to work in the same time, and if all the culture and everything is same, it's not going to work out. Whereas with remote, uh, you should have that freedom of working at your working on your own time. Obviously, you have to I can give you one example what worked out when I was working remotely for this company based in Dubai.
Hmm.
So I used to start my work at 12 in the afternoon, and the engineers working at that company, they used to start their work at I think about 10. But then what we had done is we had set up this say 2 or 3 hours of time during the day, which would be like a sync time for us. So if we wanted to get on a call, we had decided that this is when we would do that. Also, if they wanted to ask me something, or they wanted to reach out for something, they would do that during that time, and they would know that they would get an instant reply. Otherwise, I would just see the message and I would just get back to it when I'm working.
Hmm.
So you have to set up uh, I don't get the word for that. Uh, how do you call this, rituals?
Yeah, I mean, you got to set your rituals. You got to, for example, so for us, we just call them core business hours. So wherein people are
Yeah,
available at that
exactly.
point of time, so that everyone, no matter where they are on the clock. So, for example, in one of my old companies, this was the thing. Some people were based out of, say, US and all that. So it was very difficult to communicate. So we did set up some core business hours in which all the people would be available. So if there was a need for synchronous communication, people could go ahead and call people or something like that. So yeah, these are the rituals that need to be set in place so that you can make sure that even though things are moving asynchronously, but there's times that not just for work in general, also maybe sometimes you need to see the faces of everyone on your team or something like that. uh, Again, it's more of a emotional thing or more of like a common human thing wherein you want to see people around you. So yeah, I understand.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
exactly.
So how would you recommend, so for someone who's working remote, right? Or so sorry, for someone who's working like a full-time job or something like that, how would you sort of guide them to take their first steps to working remote? How do you think one can approach this as a problem? If something, for example, you can take this time right now in consideration. Like if someone wants to work remotely, because most of the companies are technically remote right now, or a lot of companies are, how would you recommend people to look out for companies who are hiring remote?
Yeah, the very first thing that I would recommend if you want to get better at remote work is get better at communication, especially written communication. Because if you can, when you're talking, there are a lot of, when you're talking face to face, there are a lot of visual cues. That's not going to be there in the written communication. So you have to be careful of that fact. So if you're able to get your message across by just in the written communication, it's going to be fine. You could also see examples of how people are doing it. You could see a lot of blog posts. People There are blog posts. People also do a lot of webinars where they talk about these things. So that would just give you an idea of how people are already doing it. And I would say one of the other thing would also be that try this out internally maybe. So see if your company is willing to take a chance, maybe talk with them and see if you could work remotely for a month. So that would give you an experience where it would just give you a taste of remote work. It's
Mhm.
not like you're not going all in. You could take a very calculated risk, and during this time you would know if this is for you or not. If that's not an option, also with a company that you want to start remote work with, you could also explore if there's an option of working with them on a contract for about 3 months or something. So this is just to make sure that you not get into something which you're not going to like, or you're just forced to like because this is your full-time job now. So yeah, just look at how other people are doing it. Talk to your friends who are already working remotely. Uh, try doing it yourself.
So that makes sense. I think it's a good idea to start from where you are currently at, because then you get a taste of how it's to work remote rather than completely quitting your current job and thinking of how can I work remote. That makes sense. I think one more question that we had from one of the people was that how do you like how would you approach uh, completely sort of like a remote company? It's very difficult sometimes to find companies that are open to remote. When you generally look for companies, how do you, or what platform do you generally look on to see if a company is remote or not, or generally how do you go about it? This is a
Yeah,
question
so
from Archit. Yeah.
I would say it's not really difficult now because there are so many remote jobs available, remote job boards now. Even when on a traditional platforms, you would now see a filter of remote job.
Hmm.
Uh, Say if you're a designer, you're looking for a remote job, you could go on Dribble. Dribble also has a job board, and they also have an option of remote filter.
Hmm.
So you could see that, and there's a remote OK job board, I think, by Peter Levels. There are a lot of the job boards available. I could share the links later. Yeah, if you'd like.
Sure.
So that, and also on Angel List and LinkedIn, you'll still be able to find that. And one thing that you should be very careful of when you're looking at this is some companies, they would hire remote, but they would want you to be in a specific time zone. So say I have seen this with a lot of companies in the US. What they do is they would say remote, but US only. So you don't have to work from an office. You could be anywhere in the US, but they are not going to hire you if you're outside of US. So just be careful of that one thing. Yeah, and there's so much information available out there. It's not difficult to find companies who are hiring remotely now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think, yeah, that's true. In some cases, time zones are something that might conflict with your existing time zone. So you might want to look out for, say, companies who either are in the time zone that you can work in, or try to find the companies that you're comfortable working in, say their time zone. So even if US is the case, then you'll have to adapt to a different time altogether, which might be difficult initially. But again, I mean, if that's something you want, you can try out, take your own good time, and then eventually get used to it.
Yeah, and this is also something which you could ask when you start interviewing with them, or even before applying, you could reach out to them, send them a message, and make sure that time zone difference would not be a problem.
Mhm.
Uh, because and with some companies, they might not have that in the job profile that you have to be based in the US, but they would still ask you to work in the US time zone. So that could also be one thing which would be a blocker for you. So just be careful about those things and just reach out to them and clear this off.
Yeah, I think it's good if these expectations are set beforehand so that all the parties sort of know. Which,
Yeah.
again, in this case, uh, I think asynchronous communication won't really work because people are there during all the times. So again, that's something that you have to look at. One thing that you've already answered, but I still want to talk a little bit about, is the fact that what do you think is the most important skill if one needs to sort of go remote? I think you've talked about communication a lot. Do you think you want to talk? I mean, how can one sort of approach that? When I say communication, not really just verbal, but also written in other forms as well. Uh, how important do you think it is? And personally, how have you worked on it to get yourself to the mark where you are at today?
So I would say that's not really just one thing. It's a combination of a lot of things. Uh, so I mean, documentation is also very important. You should be able to, and also see, this is one thing that people talk a lot about, which is when you're working remotely, you could also, feel very lonely. This used to happen with me in the beginning. So what used to happen was uh, when I was working, it was just me and my laptop working whole day, and yeah, not really seeing any human faces, not having any in-person interaction. So that could get very depressing at times. So
Mhm.
what I used to do to make up for this was on the weekends I would make sure that I would not work. I would go out with friends. This is something. This is what I would do to actually go out there and meet people in person. And also in the week time I used to see if I could go out for dinner, uh, so things like this. And like if you are a person who likes to be around people, then I would say it's going to be difficult. So also be mindful of that. But there's also another option that a lot of people work from co-working spaces. So it's not really working with your colleagues, but you could still have an office environment and you could see people working around you. So you don't feel very lonely. But these are some things that you have to get better at, and I think which is why I would say that do not go all in. Try this out with a contract work or at your job, and see the things that you like, see the things that you don't like. If there are things which you don't like but you could work on, then you could give it a shot. But then there would be some things which are just against the way against your values or against how you like working, which is if you always want people, you always want to be around people, you want to be able to have a conversation with them always. Those things are going to be very difficult to manage then. So yeah,
That
take
makes
a
sense.
calculated risk.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's about taking calculated risks, understanding if you're really cut for working remotely, and even if you're not, figuring out what are the things that you can do so that you can avail still you can avail working remote as an option. So yeah, I mean, as you said, that makes sense, right? Working out of places where you have people around you, even if they're not necessarily from your team, I think it's still good to have someone around you, see human faces. uh, but yeah, I think sometimes water cooler chat with your fellow sort of people is something which kind of is important. Do you think you sometimes miss that, especially if all the communication is asynchronous? How do you deal with something like that?
Yeah, that's one thing that I feel that we have a lot to work on in that department. So what happens is there are if you're using Slack, you have bots like Donut. So what Donut does is it would randomly pair you up with something with someone in your company. and then it would ask you to have a conversation with them. You could set up a call. So this is like a randomized thing that you it's a randomized thing that you're going to make it happen. It's not going to happen on its own. So it's mostly that you have to take all these initiatives by yourself. You have to actively reach out to people. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult. And I would say, and this is one thing which I think is not going to. I mean, it's not going to overcome the problem that we have, because obviously when you can just meet people in person, and the kind of conversation that you can have with them, that's going to be way different than you're going to have on a video call, or just on a chat. So I would say get used to it, but also try to use tools like Donut, or there are also some other website who would also randomly pair you up with other people, and say if you not want to only be communicating with the people in your company but also other people, I think there are websites which would just randomly pair you up with people, and you could see their screens. They would also be working, you would also be working, and it would give you an experience or a feel like you are actually sitting with those people and working. So these are few things that you could do, but nothing is going to come close to what we have in a real office.
Yeah, but I think those are some really good. I mean, I've never heard of Donut being one, and the other tool that you talked about. I think there are some really good initiatives being taken by these companies to at least try to curb that sense of sort of loneliness, or lacking that connection with someone, like with human friends, or something like that. I think that's really helpful. I think we'll also put down links to these tools so that people can try out these things, on their Slack channels, and make people go crazy. But I think, yeah, again, a lot of tools are there, again, just like Slack and all the other tools that help you sort of bridge that gap. So talking about building a connection, right? I think that is something that we also discussed on the previous call, right? Uh, Doing all this, being remote, and working out of your home, or working wherever you are in the whole world, sort of building connections is also something that's very important, and something that you also talk about a lot. How do you say, and also one of the fact being that whenever someone is remote, you always have this notion that everyone's busy, everyone's doing their work, and then you feel some form of hesitation, or simply you just lack confidence. Like, how do you approach someone? It can either be just for like building a connection, or maybe for work. How do you overcome something like that?
Okay. So, would you like to know about building the connections online with people who are outside of your work, or about the people who you are working with in the same company? Because those are two very different things.
Okay, let's talk about people that are outside the work.
Yeah, for people outside the work, see, I would say it's more about building those genuine connections.
Mhm.
Uh, I'm very much against this notion that you see that when you go out, when you go on events or you go to conferences, that you would see a lot of people who would just have a conversation with you for the sake of it, and the only agenda would be to hand you over their visiting card. And what you're going to do with that card is you're just going to throw it away, right?
True.
So those kind of connections are, and also the equivalent of this kind of behavior in online would be, you just reach out to someone, and you just ask for something that you need, and that's it. Then that's not going to really build a connection. What has worked for me is, I when I reach out to people, I'm actually genuinely interested in their work. Even with this, so I could give you an example of how I reach out to people for this blog series that I have called Conversations.
Yeah.
So on my blog, I do this series where I reach out to people who have inspired me in some way, and I would have a written interview with them where I would send them questions, and the interviews would be posted online. And the reason why I do this is because I want to learn from them, and I also realize that this is something that also other people would be interested in. So it's out of a personal motivation, but it also helps others. And the way that I get people to have a conversation with me is, whenever I find someone whose work that I'm really interested in, I would first I would just continuously see their work, Then slowly I would start engaging with them, which would be like if I like something, I would just say that, this, yeah, great work, or I really like what you did there, and I've not really asked for anything, right? I'm just appreciating their work, and people really like that. And also, I feel that you have to be more open to this, because whenever you don't like something, you're going to be very vocal and you're going to write about it. So when you have negative things about something, you're going to write it out. But when you like something, you're not really going to post that. So this is something that I would say that, don't do that. When you like someone's work, just appreciate that. And after some time, what you could do is, like, if you have something to ask for, which is in my case, getting them on an interview or getting them to do that conversation series with me, I
Mhm.
would first reach out to them and tell them that it's about you. Uh, Look, that I've been following your work for this time, and by this time they would also know. They would also at least have some idea of who I am. They must have seen me in some of the comments. They must be able to. They would get familiar with my face, even though they don't really know me personally. So I'm just going to tell them that, I've been following your work. It has really inspired me in this way, and yeah, and then I would say that I'm having this conversation series. It would really be nice if I could have you there, and I would say, what, 9 out of 10 times you would actually get a reply, because they know you. You're not a random stranger just reaching out to them. And I would say, even in case, like, even sometimes, if this is not a like, this is time consuming, right? Uh, the process that I just told you is time consuming. But even in cases where you're reaching out to, where you're instantly reaching out to someone, uh, try to reference some of the things that you have seen about their work and the things that you have liked,
Mhm.
and then just ask for a small little thing that you have. Do not make the whole conversation about what you want. Also, make it about why you are reaching out to them. So make it very clear.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think, especially like say on products like LinkedIn and all that, when people are just randomly reaching out to you without having a lot of context of even who you are, they'll just message you and they just start off with whatever they have to talk, and not really try to build that like genuine sort of a connection first. And I mean, I understand, given the lack of time, it's very difficult to build a genuine connection. But at least if you start from, like basically sort of introduce yourself, talk about other things that for example, as you said, you would talk about what they've done and what you find interesting about their work. I think that shows that you have some level of interest in that person, and then they also feel that yes, I mean, if you've been following me, or if you've been following that particular person, they also feel obliged that they are in the place to help you out with sort of whatever you have on mind, right?
Yeah, and it works like magic. I could also give you one example. So what happened is, a few months before, I went to the awards conference here in Amsterdam, and so there were a lot of these designers whose work I've been seeing for a good long time, and I've been really inspired by their work. So uh, and I've also engaged with them on Twitter or some other platforms. Maybe if I like their work on Dribble, I would also just post a comment there. In the tweets also, I must have engaged with them. And these people, they don't really know me, or they don't even follow me back, so they are not really seeing what I'm doing, right? But they have some kind of familiarity. And at the conference, when I walked up to them and when I met a few of these people, one example would be Claudio, who used to be a head designer at Microsoft. I think he's the one who worked on Fluent Design System, and now he's a director at Huge, which is a design agency.
Mhm.
So uh, and at the conference when I met him, the first thing that he told me, I recognize your face. I've seen you somewhere. And then I'm like, wow, this guy already knows me. And then I just showed him my Twitter profile. And then he's like, yeah, you're that guy. And I think he had also seen Product Disrupt. So he also talked about that. Uh, and it was just like a genuine thing that happened, because I was already engaging with them. And after the conference, he also followed me back. And yeah, so I mean, I wouldn't say like he's become like a good friend, but I would say he at least knows me now.
Mhm.
And now, if I'm stuck with something, or if I need help with something, I would, if I reach out to him, I'm sure that I'm going to get a reply.
Yeah, I think yeah, I mean that beautifully sums how you can sort of build a relationship. So again, there are two parts to it. One is uh, basically trying to connect to that person through like directly or indirectly being around so that they start sort of recognizing you. It can be through showing appreciation for your work, as you said, just to sum it up, and also talking about or commenting maybe on whatever they've done, or genuinely writing about maybe, for example, if someone has posted something, then how did you do it, or what were your thoughts behind this, so that you can kick off a conversation, right? And then from that, you can sort of build into a deeper connection rather than directly jumping into a conversation trying to get some value out of them. And the
Yeah,
second thing being, if possible, right? I mean, you have for product disrupt, which is a great thing. If in some capacity you're able to generate some form of content for people, I think that also puts you in a very good place. It can be any form of work you do. It does not necessarily, for example, have to be a newsletter, or for example, the way I'm doing videos. You can also be putting your own work that you do in form of blogs, telling about your process, your design system and things like that, or how did you approach a project. And if people read that, and then they'll also sort of start seeing bits of you in all those pieces, which put together, when all of it comes in place, you start building that subconscious level of connection with people, which is, I think, something that it's sort of all about.
yeah.
Yeah. So this is one question that we got from Kriti, talking about when you was talking about platform and approaching people, right? So there are two parts to it. One is related to the platform, and the other one is approaching people for work. So which platform do you think, or if you think at all, there is one best platform, or which platform do you think is good if you want to connect with someone, build a connection? First question is that, and the second question being, if you plan on sharing your work, how often should you be sharing work that it gets you some kind of sort of familiarity with people?
Okay. So the first one was about the platform, right?
Yeah.
I would say Twitter would be the best place for that. I've built many connections from Twitter. And by the way, my first freelance job also came from Twitter.
That's
Uh,
nice.
and the way that it happened was there was this one lady in Mumbai. She's a soft skills trainer,
Hmm.
and she wanted to build a WordPress blog. So I think she had just posted a question about how could someone help me out with this, and this is a time when I was what in my second year of engineering, and I was just curious, learning all these new things. I was not really a WordPress expert, but I just replied to her, and she set up a meeting. Uh, we met at the Starbucks, and also this is a time when I was not making any money, right? So she called me for that meeting, and we discussed her project there, and yeah, it worked out well. So we decided that we would go ahead with this. And you know what happened after that meeting was she told me, so what's your hourly charge? Like how much do I owe you for this? And I was like, owe you for what? She's like, the meeting that you had with me. We spent 1 hour, right? And then I was like, so I mean, I didn't say this out loud, but what I'm thinking is, like, why are you going to pay me for this? You even paid for my coffee, and yeah, like, wow, people are actually willing to pay you money for this. So yeah. Anyway, that was just one of the story that happened. But on Twitter, I have found actually a lot of people. I've made connections there. I think the first interaction that we also had was on Twitter, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So Twitter is a great place for that, and also the reason why it works is it's because it's contextual. So people are sharing something over there. They are putting out content. If you connect, if you find something relatable, and if you engage to that, that's a very genuine way of building a connection. And also nowadays there are so many Slack communities which are like very niche communities or focus groups.
Hmm.
If you are into freelance, there are so many Slack groups for freelance. If you are into the whole no code movement, you'll also find Slack groups for that. There are also Slack groups for designers, also Facebook groups. So I would say, I mean, Facebook is, I think it's, let's be honest, it's dying now. But then Facebook also had this charm with groups. Even now, there's this one particular group that I'm a part of, which is called the Designers Guild. And I've also built some connections from there. And people there, they are very genuine and very helpful. So they have this very good code of conduct. So people that they are not at all markety or they don't push for things, uh, and they would always be willing to help you out. So just in terms of public platform, I would say try to make the best out of Twitter, and yeah, just become a part of these communities where your interests are, and yeah, that would be great. So what was the second question now?
The second question was around, say, posting work. Whatever it is that you're posting, right? For example, in your case, the newsletter and other articles and things like that. Is there a frequency that one should have? Should you be like sort of posting regularly, or how do you generally go about it?
So I don't really know about the frequency. I mean, this is something that is up to the people, right? Some people they would just constantly keep on posting, and some people would take their time but put out quality work. But I would say in all the cases it's about consistency. So you can't just like you have to be consistent with something. Only then it's going to work out. And I can also give you this one example.
Mhm.
So there's a friend of mine who does great work, and he's also into side projects. He would also keep on he would always be working on something. But the problem is that he never really shares those things. And I mean he would not really share the process or not really let people know the thing that he's been working on or those things. But when the product is ready or when the side project is ready, he would post that. He post a link to that and ask people to uh, appreciate that or like that or upvote and all those things. And what happens is people have not really seen you. People don't really know what this thing is. They are not invested into the idea. So you can't just not really give any value and then just go out there and say, hey, I've made this cool thing, check this out. Nobody's really going to give a fuck about it. But if you keep on sharing your process, if you let people know what you're working on, if you let them know your struggles, if you have learned something, if you let them know about that, then people are going to know who you are, and they're going to be already invested into the idea, and it's obviously going to get you more traction. So it's not really about I mean there's no, I don't really have an answer for if there's a frequency that you just stick to, but you should obviously be consistent. Don't just go disappear, work in silo, and then come out when the work is ready. Even when you don't have something to share in terms of work, still be try to engage with people, share your process, share your learnings. Just be consistent with it. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, I think that really beautiful sums that up, and I think that's what I was looking for as well. Uh, and behind the scenes, again, it's the dirty side of things as well, right? People don't like to share the dirty side of things, right? Whatever goes behind, how the sketch files look like, before you've really pushed the final product or something like that. But I think it's very important to share behind the scenes as well, because that is what helps build that connection. That it's not just about the finalized work or the finalized product or whatever you're pushing out in the end, but also how did you build up to that. And I think that is where sort of real connections happen, because when people see you also during going through that struggle, you're trying to build something, then you might be sharing like alternatives or things that you learned, or what was your inspiration, or maybe something just as simple as this was the first thing that we created, now we're thinking of something like this, or maybe sharing your stories, success, failure stories, or whatever. I think that also, it's like a marketing machine in itself, right? You
Yeah.
become this person that people want to follow, because people see that you're not just pushing the final product, but you're also telling how did you go about it. And again, there's so many great threads on Twitter in which we actually see people talking about how did they build their startup, or time to time talking about like what did they learn in the past quarter, or in the past couple of quarters, or in the past year, things that they've done that helped them sort of scale the business, scale the startup, or scale a particular idea.
Yeah, building in public works like yeah. Building in public works like a charm. There's this one community called as indie hackers.
Hmm.
Uh, I mean, for anyone who's into product or into making independent projects or side projects, I would very strongly recommend them to join indie hackers. So it's a place where all the product people or all the people who are makers, they call it makers, they hang out. So these people, they come from a very genuine place. They when they are stuck on something, they would ask for help in the community. People would always people would get back to them with comments. If they need feedback on something, they'll also get that. There are so many good people out there, and and also what I did with product disrupt was I also started a thread on Twitter, which is I started sharing that how I've been working on this, and it was just like I wanted to build it in public, and I would usually want to do that through a newsletter, but Twitter worked. I mean, yeah, Twitter is something that I just always keep on going back to,
Mhm.
and what happened with this was, this also made me accountable for things. Now that I put this out in the world that I'm working on this, people and when I was not sharing any updates, people used to sometimes reach out and say, what happened about product disrupt version 2.0? What's the progress on that? And yeah, it just made me accountable. Now I know that I have to actually work on it. And also, when I was sharing all this journey, people knew that something like this is going to come out, and they were also invested into this, and it was no more like me just working on it alone, right? There were other people who were also watching out for it. uh, Sometimes when I was stuck or if I needed any feedback or suggestion or something, I would also share that, and people would engage on that. So ultimately, what happened was they knew what was happening, and it was not a surprise when it came out. So which is why these people who were already engaging on the whole process, they were also the ones who supported it. And yeah, this is how you generally just organically get traction.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also talking about like product disrupt in general, or working on the side projects, which brings us to the third stage of this session. How do you generally find the inspiration to say work on like a side project or something like that? You've been working, you personally worked on a bunch of them. How do you find the inspiration? How do you know what do you really want to pursue?
Yeah, so there are a few ways that you could go about it. Now, the one thing is, the very first way would be you actually have a problem of your own which you want to solve. And yeah, if you have a problem and you are a maker or you're a designer or an engineer, you're a person who could build things. That's a great place to be in, right? You just go out there and try to solve that problem for yourself. And what happens is other people might also have the same problem, and that is how you're going to find your genuine audience. So this is one way of going about it. So just see that in the things that you get stuck with, try to have a think about it and see if there are ways that you could solve it. And before you actually just jump into it, you could also see how other people are doing it, and if there's something which would not work for your case, or if you could tweak it in some way, yeah, that would be one way to go about it. The second way I would say would be look for problems to solve for other people. Now, how you can find that out is, again, going back to the communities, you always you would see people talking about these things in the community, right? If they have a problem, uh, they would be talking about it. They would be posting about it on Reddit, on Twitter, or on Product Hunt. There are so many places. So just keep an eye out for things that people are really struggling with, and yeah, that could be an idea. Uh, that's where you can source the idea from, and also, like, if you could also just ask for things online, right? Like if you are a member of say if you are a member of a community which is into building houses, uh, and and you are yeah, this is something that you're generally passionate about, so you could just ask those people what are the problems that they face in their day-to-day life, and that is when you could identify if there's a way that you could solve it or you could build a product for that. So try to solve your own problems first,
Mhm.
and if not that, try to source the problems from other people. Just keep an eye on Product Hunt as well. A lot of great products keep on coming out over there, and over the time when you see, it's also about it's like the respiration process, or it's like breathing. So when you take in a lot of these things, when you are actually looking at the things that people are building, somehow or the other, you will ultimately also start generating your own ideas. So I would say just get into that momentum.
True. That makes sense. What was the inspiration behind Product Disrupt? Would you like to share some of that? Maybe some of the story behind how did you go about making it, and maybe your initial, uh, the initial struggle that you did. How did you put out the first version? Maybe a little bit of that.
Yeah, sure. So with Product Disrupt, I as we talk about this in the beginning of our call, I came from an engineering background and I taught myself design. And how I did that, I looked for people who were sharing their work online, their case studies, newsletters, blogs, or podcasts. And over the time, I had built this directory of, or I had built this curation that I was continuously looking at, right? Uh, and and what used to happen was a lot of my friends who came from engineering background, they used to always keep on asking that what exactly is design? If I want to design, how do I learn that? So I used to constantly get this question asked. So I could see a gap over there, right? So I knew that I knew that how I have done it, and I know that these people are also asking for it. So I just thought that I could, if I would just make a website and where I would put all these resources, which I'm already referring. So and then I could just share this website with these people, and yeah, it would be helpful to them, right? So what I did was after Wishberry, I had some free time. I had some free time uh, before I started the contract job. So
Mhm.
between that time, what I did was I just quickly grabbed a template or a framework from some of the online store, and I just put together a website in what about 2 weeks. It was a very simple process, nothing really complicated. I just made a note of the things that I wanted to put there, and yeah, just build it out. And what happened was, after I built this, I posted this on Product Hunt, and fortunately for me, it became the number one product of the day. And when that happens, it's a huge thing because you get a lot of traction from there, and the community is also very supportive, and they are also very open to give you feedback. So in the comments, a lot of people, they really liked it, and they also told me why they did like it, because at that time, nowadays you see there are a lot of curation websites, right?
True.
But at that time there were not many curation websites like this, and the all the resources which were put there, those are very genuine resources. There was no peer pressure involved in this. It was actually what I had been following. So the quality was good. It really stuck with people. They really appreciated that. And some of the people, they also told me that, if there was a newsletter where they could subscribe, where I would be curating all these resources and sending them on a regular basis, they'd be very happy to. So yeah, that gave me the idea of starting the newsletter. And what after that comment, I quickly set up I quickly jumped into MailChimp and saw how I could start a newsletter. I didn't know anything about it, and also this is something that I was doing on a side, like just a side project, right?
Yeah.
So I did not have any pressure of that I had to have to make it right from the very beginning.
Mhm.
And this is also something that I tell people, that you have to start somewhere. You have to start with something, and iteratively you can improve on things. So this is how Product Disrupt started. Just trying to solve my own problem. I wanted to shut those people off who used to always bug me with questions. I wanted to give this website to them so they could start learning design on their own.
Mhm.
But now it has become very different from what it started. But
I mean, now it's scaled to a very big level. What are your future goals with Product Disrupt? What do you want to? So do you want to keep it like a newsletter, or do you have some other plans around it, or how do you plan to like work
yeah,
around it?
so I would like to think of Product Disrupt as a community of designers and makers and product people.
Hmm.
So I mean, this is something. It's a very long vision. I'm nowhere close to it, but what I think of it is, it could become into a community for all these product people who like making products, where they could hang out, they could ask for feedback, or they could find people to collaborate on their projects.
Hmm.
So yeah, just a community where it would, and also, so the gap that I see is with Dribble and Behance and websites like this, you don't really get any real insights, or you don't really get any real feedback, right? Whenever you post something, people will just say, hey, great work, nice color, nice fonts, things like that. So which is not really helpful. And also, and on Behance, you have seen so many times that, hey, I liked your work, check out my profile.
Yes.
So and so I see that, it's a great platform for discovery,
Mhm.
uh, wherein you can find out really good work over there. And there are also, and also with Product Hunt, I can see that it's a great place for discovery of products. But then when people want to start collaborating, or when they want feedback on something, they always go to different places. So yeah, I would like to facilitate that, make it into a community where people could come together and start making products.
Yeah, I think that would be a great way to sort of get all the people together as well. How can people sort of enroll into something like this? Where do they find Product Disrupt if they want to
So
say join this? How do they do that?
so Product Disrupt, you could just go to the website productdisrupt.com. I would say definitely subscribe to the newsletter, because I send a newsletter every 15 days,
Mhm.
where I curate all the things that I've been looking up. Uh, it's a curation of side projects, inspiration, stories, things that are useful, things that would be useful to you. Uh, yeah, you could just go to the productdisrupt.com and subscribe to the newsletter.
We'll also put the link to Product Disrupt down in the description below, and also to some of the Medium articles that you've published over time, your personal story, and a bunch of other cool things that you've posted. Apart from that, I think one more question that I have, it's probably one of the last questions, is if I have an idea to build, right? Like from a very pragmatic point of view, say I want to build a digital good, right? How do I go about sort of researching? How would you go about sort of researching if this is something that would even sell, or if this is something that would bring any form of value to the people or to me? How do you do that research? How do you validate that?
Yeah, so to validate that, you could start sharing it. You could start talking about it, and you could see if you're getting any traction on that.
Mhm.
Uh, you go to places like Indie Hackers or Twitter, and just start talking about it. So that's one way to know if this is something that people are interested in. And also the other thing would be, before you go all into it, you could have a rough outline, and you could set up a pre-sales or pre-order page, where you'd build like a landing page, where you would just give a glimpse of what you're going to build. You could have a sign up form over there, or you could also just ask people directly for money. Like if it's going to be a paid product,
Mhm.
uh, just set up a pre-order page. Give a discount to people who want to order it first. And this is like the best validation that you can get, right? If people are willing to pay you money even when the product is not ready, that means they really want that.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it is also going to motivate you to actually work on it. It is going to hold you accountable for that. With signups also, you would know if your product has generated enough interest or not.
Mhm.
uh, yeah, and if you do not want to do that, then at least start talking about it. Start with something. And also, one advice with building something, I would say, before you go all in into building something very big, build a small thing. Build like an MVP. Don't and nowadays there are so many no code tools, which allow you to quickly put together a product. You could connect Airtable, Zapier, Google Slides, Webflow. There are so many of these tools which you can use to validate your idea before you actually go ahead and build like a full-fledged thing.
Right. Yeah, and I think again, as you said, it's about taking calculated risks, sort of trying to understand before you spend a lot of time doing it. I think one should sort of validate and see if this is something that will even help anyone at all, rather than just working in silo. I mean, as you said, working in silo. Again, all of these things could sort of come in together. Don't really work in silo. Start posting about the things that you're doing, things that you're thinking about. What problem do you think that one digital good or that product or a service or whatever you're trying to make is going to solve? And once you start once you start talking about it, and once you build momentum, You'll also get a lot of feedback from people. I mean, as you did when you posted the first version on product hunt, you'll also get a lot of feedback from people as to what are the other improvements that can be done that would help it, help make it more sort of tailored for that particular type of target audience. So I think, yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
and and it's also about the story, right? People don't really buy products; they buy stories. Uh, if you share why you're building something or why you made something, why it's important to you, what's the story behind it, people are always interested into that. So if you start talking about it, that's obviously going to be great.
yep. Uh, we have one last question, which is, what do you think? This is from Kriti. What do you think drives people to contact you online? What do you think generally works the best? Is it designs? Is it blogs? Or is it some other form of content? Maybe something that you could probably talk from your own experience. Something, say you've posted and then you got the maximum amount of engagement with that, or people coming back to you, remembering you for that.
Yeah, so I'd say I could only tell you what's working out for me, right?
Mhm.
So it's about, and people always appreciate if you can give them some value. So if you have your learnings or experiences, like if you work on a particular project, the kind of experience you had from that or the learnings that you had, and if you share that, people always find it relatable. They know that it comes from a very genuine place, and and if it helps them in us in some way, they would also just reciprocate on that. They would reach out to you. They would thank you for that. So I mean, it's not about posting design content or product content or those things. I mean, obviously, whatever is the thing that you're most interested in, you would do more of that.
Yeah.
But it's mostly about giving people value and just being helpful. Yeah, that is what motivates people to reach out to you, or people, and also when it's also when people find something relatable, they would start engaging with you. So just be helpful. That's it.
Yeah, and there's always, and I think this is something that we talked in the last video as well. There's always going to be people who will be ahead of you and behind you, and maybe you
Yeah.
cannot contribute a lot of value to the people ahead of you, but there's always going to be people behind you, and whatever you learned, even if it's the smallest thing, and you are sharing it. Again, no one's really an expert in life. People are always learning, but whatever you can share, if you do share that, there will be people who will find that helpful, and people will reach out to you. Again, for example, content like this, none of us is experts, but we're trying to share our stories so that it reaches out to
Exactly.
people and someone can take some takeaways from it. And for example, say if someone's trying to start a newsletter, whatever Darshan shared might be of some use. And then you can also start thinking of it in that way, that how can you go about and test it, something like that. So yeah, it's about learning these bits and bytes from anywhere you can. And if possible, share your journey, share your process, share your development. That will help bring values to the lives of other people as well.
Yeah, and very true what you said there, which is you don't really have to be an expert on something to share those things, and it's about your story, right? Now your story cannot be wrong. You don't have to be an expert to tell your own story. You just start with what you have. If you learn something, just share it. It could be useful for some people. Some people might not find it useful. That's okay. Uh, but yeah, your story is always going to be unique to you. And also, and this is one thing that I would also say be careful of, which is do not uh, do not portray yourself as an expert on something if you don't know something enough. Whereas if you just say that this is what you feel or this is what your learnings are, then yeah, it's obviously going to be very well accepted than saying that I'm an expert on this and only listen to me or hear what I have to say and ignore everything else. This is the single source of truth. Do not be that kind of person.
Yeah, that's definitely good. Gonna put you in a very tough spot if you say something wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions from the people online, or have people sent you any other questions?
So I think we've during the whole discussion we've taken a lot of these questions. We have uh, one more question from Anurag. Have you seen any side projects that have turned as big as a startup? Please tell us. Please tell us about those. Do you
Yeah.
personally remember? Yeah.
Yes, there are so many, and such a sucker for side projects that I just keep looking at it. So Unsplash, it's a great story. Started as a very simple side project, they were solving a problem for themselves. They just needed good photography, good photos. They did not have it. Uh, they clicked some good photos and they started sharing it. Started with a newsletter, and now you can see Unsplash is one of the best websites for free stock photos out there. Product Hunt also started as a side project. Ryan Hoover is a person who was always very interested into products,
Mhm.
and is to constantly keep on looking for things that people have built, and is to share that to a very small list of his through a newsletter or through Twitter, and then ultimately he made it into a platform. uh, there are so many inspiring side project stories that started with something very small and became very big.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's just it's about finding that right sort of market fit, and if the side project that you're making solves some big problem, then I mean, it is gonna become it's gonna become something big with time anyway. When you put in that
Yeah,
effort that's required.
yeah, and one of the another great example is Nomad List, started by Peter Levels. So Peter Levels, he's actually the one who pioneered this whole movement of people working remotely and traveling. So people working out of their backpacks. So what he did was he started going on these vacations, and he wanted to make a community where similar people could hang out.
Mhm.
And he made this small website where people could find those places, and also people could find information about that places, like what is the internet how is the internet connection over there, what are the prices, how is the cost of living, the standard of living, and all those things.
Mhm.
And now it has become so big that I think he makes more than $1 million in a year.
Yeah. So again, that's how solving problems for others can scale up to something that's as big as that. Again, it can purely either come from your own motivation of doing something, or your understanding of a problem that needs to be solved.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Darshan, as we go towards closing this, there's one question that we ask all of our speakers, which is, what's on your reading list? Is there something you would like to recommend to the to the viewers? Maybe about maybe anything you've read, you are reading. It can be an article, it can be a book, it can be a report or something like that. Maybe on what are you reading so far, or maybe on remote design or something like that.
Yeah, sure. So I'm not really a book person, but right now I've picked up a book called Laying the Foundations. It's by Andrew Colwell. It's about how you could think in terms of systems, and how you could take the systematic approach to design. So I've not finished the book yet, but it's already great. So I could recommend that. And I'm someone who reads a lot of newsletters and blogs. So you could just go to Product Disrupt, and all the listings that you find there is actually. 1 second, I'll have to put the laptop on charge.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. So if you go to Product Disrupt, all the listings that you find there, that's actually something that I read or listen to on a very regular basis. So I've mentioned some good podcast over there as well. A podcast by Rob Hope is one of my favorites. It's called
Yes.
Yo, and yeah, I've talked about it a lot. So you
Yep.
obviously know that how inspired I am by this podcast.
Yep.
Indie Hackers also had a great podcast. If you're not into reading, definitely start listening to this podcast. uh, yeah, and also I've started writing a book of my own now. So it's about helping you crack the product design interview process. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I was recently laid off from my last job here in Berlin,
Mhm.
and it was a very difficult time because also the pandemic happened. So I was interviewing with a lot of companies, and when I was interviewing, I had also started documenting it. So I documented questions from each and every interview that I had, and I realized the things that they are that the people are looking for, the kind of questions that they asked during the interviews. I tracked the whole process in the Notion. I made a board on Notion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add share all these insights in the book. So it could be very helpful for someone who's looking to get a product design job. I will also bundle it up with the templates that I have, which is the resume template or the cover template, or how you reach out to someone like how you reach out to these recruiters on email, how do you do the follow-up emails, some tips to also do the negotiation. So I hope it's useful.
And when is it coming out?
I have not put a date on it, but I'm going to follow the same process that I talked about earlier.
Yeah.
I started sharing about it on Twitter. It got in decent traction. People were really interested in it, so I know that there's some interest for it. And what I'm going to do is I've already started writing it, but in the meantime, I would also set up a landing page where people could say either sign up if they're interested, or I would also just give a huge discount for people who want to pre-order it. But sorry, I don't have the date yet.
No issues. I thought we could probably make a public commitment.
No,
No, I got it. And
but soon I'll do it soon.
where can people find you, Darshan? If people want to get in touch with you, have any questions, or someone's planning to start something of their own, where can they get in touch with you? That you're the most active at any platform.
Yeah, the best place to get in touch with me instantly would be Twitter. I'm at Weirdo Wizard on Twitter. And if you have something like if you have a long question, and if you want to share enough context, or if there's a story behind it, or if you want to collaborate on something, in that case, just send me an email. Uh, my email is dg@darshangajara.com. But yeah, you'd find the link and all those things on Twitter and my website.
Mhm. Cool. And we've already actually I've listed most of the links to your social media profiles and all that down in the description for this video already. But we'll also list down your email so that people can reach out to you if they have any idea or if they want to discuss something in detail with context, as you said. Cool. I think that sums up this. That pretty much sums up this whole video. Thank you so much, Darshan, for coming and spending all this time with us. Really grateful to have you here and listen to your story. Uh, and we're also really excited to get our hands on the book that you're working on, and would definitely share it with the people who've been here today. And yeah, and expect to hear it soon. Hear something about it soon, man. Thank you so much for coming today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Sahil. I had a great conversation. Really enjoyed it. I wish I had done a better job at structuring my answers. Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's perfectly fine. It's gonna be a free flowing conversation. I think that is the beautiful part of it. You want to keep it like that, so it's perfectly fine. Again, thanks to everyone else as well who joined us during this time. If you have any questions, you can reach out to Darshan on Twitter. You can mail him as he said, and I hope Darshan will take care of that. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, will do.
Thank you so much, and good night to all of you. See you again. Bye
Yeah,
bye.
see ya.